correct?
No, that's not accurate.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to pivot away from the Democrats' fake outrage on lawfare and talk about real lawfare. How has your representation of President Trump in the biggest weaponization of the justice system against a single individual because they didn't want to get back into office and lawfare shaped your view of the justice system?
What's up, Patriots? Welcome back to America First. If you're tired of the establishment's games and want the truth about what's really happening in our justice system, you've come to the right place. Before we dive into today's explosive content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more America First content that the mainstream media won't show you. Today, we're breaking down this incredible Senate confirmation hearing that exposes the biggest political persecution in American history. What you're about to see is a judicial nominee who had the courage to defend President Trump against the weaponized Department of Justice, and his testimony reveals the shocking extent of how our justice system was corrupted by partisan actors.
Well, from the perspective of a prosecutor, Senator, it turned me into a person who wanted to get that building back on the right track. A track where people are, in fact, doing the right thing for the right reasons. And I think there's many, many, many people, career civil servants in the department who are doing just that. But I also think that there are parts of the department that had lost sight of that obligation. And I saw that in my experiences as a defense lawyer. And so what I would say is that that experience provided me with intense focus on reform efforts to make sure that the unelected bureaucracy at the department was not in a position to subvert the political will of the democratically elected president.
Let's take a little time machine back to 2023 when you, in your previous testimony, talked about decided to join Todd Blanche in the legal team. That was at the time many people in this country sort of wrote off President Trump as a candidate. The Democrats didn't think he was ever going to win. I endorsed him very early. I thought he would and was hoping that he would. But the links to which nonprofits and other organizations went to punish anyone who was involved in either defending President Trump or had worked for President Trump, trying to deny them employment, I mean, is well documented. So to take that on, I would agree with your character. I think that took a lot of courage for you to do it. In hindsight now, it looks like obviously a very smart decision. You guys were very successful in the defense, and he went on to win the election in the popular vote in a landslide. But at the time, that wasn't the case. I want to ask you, in some of this lawfare, Michael Colangelo left, he was the #3 guy at DOJ and left to join the New York District Attorney's Office in the prosecution of President Trump. Is that unusual for someone to leave that kind of position to go to a DA's office with prosecuting a political opponent?
Senator, I have to be very careful here because of the judicial canons that bind me as a nominee.
Let me ask it this way. Have you ever heard of something like that happening before?
To my understanding, that was a pretty unique set of circumstances.
Let me speak about another set of unique circumstances. Is it unusual for like a assistant district attorney in a Georgia case to be meeting with the White House counsel's office about a prosecution of President Trump? Would that be sort of an unusual set of circumstances to be visiting the White House? Let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of a scenario like that previously?
Senator, if I could frame it this way, there's publicly filed briefing signed by myself and other defense lawyers when we were defending President Trump that regarded the circumstances that you just described as part of a discovery violation.
Okay. Tish James, the Attorney General in New York, ran for office saying she wanted to go after and prosecute President Trump. Have you ever heard of an attorney? I ran for Attorney General in my state. Have you ever heard of anyone campaigning on the idea in the United States of America? I'm not talking about a third world banana republic, but in the United States of America, criminally prosecuting a political opponent. That was their pitch to the voters. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
I've got to be very careful here about getting too close to politics.
Sure.
Under the judicial canon, Senator.
Okay. Jack Smith was appointed special prosecutor to try to, again, imprison President Trump for the rest of his life so he couldn't run for office. Could you speak? Were you involved in the legal team defending President Trump in that prosecution as well?
Both in the District of Columbia and in the Southern District of Florida.
Could you just rattle off a couple of things that you think were unusual, departures from how prosecutors would normally handle cases like that again has informed your position now to make sure that that never happens again to somebody in this country?
I will, Senator, and I referenced some of these a moment ago, and I just want to be clear. What I'm doing is just referencing public arguments that I made as a defense lawyer.
Yes.
But yes.
Not personal musings. These are, yes, absolutely what we're
Nor political
filed with the court.
These are legal arguments that we presented that, for example, in a case as complex as the case in Florida, with the allegations that were set forth, in our judgment as defense lawyers, we argued to the court that it was highly unusual to try and proceed to trial as quickly as those prosecutors initially proposed.
Anything else that struck you as unusual that you can recall from the public filings?
I think just to be safe and to stay on the
well,
right side of
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make the point that while the Democrats are trying to manufacture something here, like we're on the other side of the most political prosecution of a political opponent this country has ever seen, and I hope to God that never happens again. And your experience, I think, will make you a better judge. So congratulations.
Senator Ronald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask every nominee who...
Let's start with the elephant in the room. This nominee didn't just represent any client. He represented the 45th President of the United States during what he correctly identifies as the most coordinated attack on a political candidate in our nation's history. When asked how this experience shaped his view of the justice system, his answer should terrify every American who believes in equal justice under law. The nominee explains that his experience as a defense attorney showed him that parts of the Department of Justice had completely lost sight of their obligation to serve justice rather than political agendas. He witnessed firsthand how unelected bureaucrats were actively working to subvert the will of the democratically elected president. This isn't conspiracy theory. Folks, this is testimony under oath from someone who saw it happen. The senator asking these questions deserves credit for having the backbone to address what everyone knows, but few will say out loud. He points out the incredible courage it took for this nominee to join Trump's legal team in 2023, when the entire establishment was blacklisting anyone who dared to defend the president. Nonprofit organizations, law firms, and corporate interests were systematically punishing lawyers and staff who had worked for Trump or defended him. Think about what this means for our republic. When the system actively punishes lawyers for providing legal defense to a former president, we're no longer operating under the rule of law. We're operating under the rule of whoever holds institutional power at the moment. The testimony reveals several smoking guns that prove this was coordinated political warfare, not legitimate prosecution. First, Michael Colangelo, the number 3 official at the Department of Justice, suddenly left his high-level federal position to join a local district attorney's office, specifically to prosecute Trump. The nominee calls this pretty unique circumstances because he has to be diplomatic, but let's call it what it is: completely unprecedented and obviously coordinated. Second, we learn about assistant district attorneys meeting with White House counsel about prosecuting Trump. This isn't normal prosecutorial behavior. This is political coordination between different levels of government to target one man. The defense team had to file discovery violations because of these inappropriate communications. Third, and perhaps most damning, is the fact that New York Attorney General Letitia James literally campaigned on prosecuting Trump. She ran for office promising voters she would use the power of her office to go after a political opponent. The senator rightly points out that this is banana republic behavior, not American justice. The nominee's experience defending Trump in both the Washington, D.C. and Florida cases gives him unique insight into how prosecutors abandoned normal procedures when it came to Trump. He specifically mentions the unusual push for an extremely quick trial timeline in the complex Florida case, which any experienced lawyer knows is designed to prevent adequate preparation of a defense. This testimony matters because it comes from someone who will now be in a position to help restore integrity to our justice system. He's seen the corruption from the inside, and he's committed to making sure it never happens again. His focus on preventing unelected bureaucrats from subverting democratically elected officials is exactly what we need right now. The broader implications of this testimony cannot be overstated. We're not talking about normal political disagreements or even typical prosecutorial overreach. We're talking about a systematic effort by multiple jurisdictions, federal and state, to use a criminal justice system to prevent a political opponent from running for office. This is a kind of behavior we criticize in authoritarian regimes around the world. Every American, regardless of political affiliation, should be concerned about the precedent this sets. If the justice system can be weaponized against a former president, it can be weaponized against anyone. The only thing protecting any of us from this kind of persecution is the integrity of our institutions, and that integrity was seriously compromised during these prosecutions. The fact that Trump won the election and the popular vote despite this unprecedented legal assault proves that the American people saw through the charade. But we can't let our guard down. The same people who orchestrated this lawfare are still in positions of power, and are already planning their next moves. This is why nominations like this matter so much. We need people in the justice system who understand what went wrong and are committed to fixing it. We need judges and prosecutors who will follow the law rather than political agendas. We need to rebuild the wall between politics and prosecution that was torn down during this shameful chapter in American history. The senator's closing statement perfectly captures what we witnessed. The most political prosecution of a political opponent this country has ever seen. This isn't hyperbole. It's an accurate description of what happened. Multiple jurisdictions, federal and state, Democratic and Republican, coordinated to use the criminal justice system as a political weapon. Patriots, this testimony should serve as a wake-up call. The deep state is real. The swamp is real, and the weaponization of government against political opponents is real. But it should also give us hope. We have people like this nominee who are willing to stand up to the system and fight for justice. The fact that this persecution ultimately failed shows the strength of our democratic institutions and the wisdom of the American people. But we can't become complacent. We need to stay vigilant, support leaders who will fight for justice, and never forget what happened here. This is exactly why America First matters. We're not just fighting for policies. We're fighting for the basic principle that justice should be blind and that no one, not even former presidents, should be above the law, but also that no one should be subjected to selective prosecution based on their political beliefs. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to America First. Share this content with your friends and family, because the mainstream media won't tell you the truth about what really happened. We're going to keep fighting for truth, justice, and the American way, one video at a time. Stay strong, stay informed, and remember, America first, always.